going to the Catholic Worker for the men that live in the parks downtown, because they need some clothing too. And also it's going up to the Shaaray Place at Little Sisters, because their families can get vouchers and go into the Shaaray Place and get clothing that is not what we call migrant specific.
Thank you. You guys did an amazing job. Amazing. So, we didn't do this alone. This has been a multi-faith and intra-Jewish effort. In addition to the Synagogue Coalition on the Refugee and Immigration Crisis, we have people from Manhattan Together here, and all the various, we have people from St. James, St. Ignatius, Heavenly Rest. So thank you. The Catholic Worker.
LOS is here.
LOS is here. I mean, if I forgot anything, please forgive me. It's been a long day for us. But I want to just tell you a little bit about the Synagogue Coalition, because as I said, we have, they're the ones responsible for us actually being here and connected to Team TLC. We've been a member of the Synagogue Coalition shortly after its founding in 2016. While its original purpose was to share information and work together on the Syrian refugee crisis, remember that, still there, and to support legislative efforts to increase the number of refugees arriving to the U.S., that work expanded to include advocating for immigration reform and supporting immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, both in New York City and at the southern border. The coalition is made up of 29 synagogues and 6 nonprofit organizations in the New York City area, including, very importantly, Highest, the organization with which Shaaray Tefila worked to welcome and sponsor an Iraqi refugee family in 2019 and an Afghan refugee family this past year. Ruth Messinger, as I mentioned, has been a member of the coalition since before TST joined, wearing at least 3 hats. She's social justice activist in residence at the Marlene Meyerson JCC, social justice fellow at Jewish Theology, she doesn't know, and a member in very good standing, very important standing at SAJ, the Society for Advancement of Judaism. Listen, I met her in 2008 on a trip to India, the American Jewish World Service. I shortly thereafter joined her board and have always been wowed by Ruth. I had a whole bunch of things to tell you about her, but she's going to kill me if I mention them all. But I will say, for those of you that don't know her from AJWS, you might know her from a 20-year career in city government as a member of the city council. And then, we have our president, and one of her successors is here now with us today. Anyway, Ruth brought the word of our third speaker, as I told you, Ilze Thielmann, to our attention, and that's when I knew we had to focus this day on that. Listen, I'm going to... Ilze Thielmann has been running an all-volunteer effort to greet the asylum-seeking migrants that have been arriving daily since August, when the governor of Texas decided to pull a political stunt and try to teach New York City and the other sanctuary cities a lesson into what they've been dealing with. Well, you know, maybe it was his ignorance or just his failure to notice that we already had 800,000 undocumented immigrants in New York City. We've been doing a very careful job, at least some of us, of trying to welcome them, trying to deal with them. We are also a city that promises shelter to every one of those people. So we've had our hands full already, but the city wasn't prepared for this onslaught. Ruth's going to lead a discussion for us about this with Ilze, so she'll outline what the problem is, what the ongoing needs are, and whatnot. I'll skip most of her introduction, as she's instructed me to. I will say, just in welcoming our borough president, we first met you, and you won't remember this, it's fine. But Carol and I met you when families started getting separated, and you turned your Harlem office into a depot to, oh my God, it looked worse than our room.
It was fabulous.
It's fabulous.
Outside, on the sidewalk, on the street, we covered everything.
He is no newcomer to carry about these issues, and we're so happy to see you again today and have you here. So, let's hear from Ruth. Thank you, and thank you all for being here.
Really. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jolie. Thank you, Carol. First of all, all of you, give yourselves a huge round of applause. Thank you to Rabbi Joel for his ongoing and extraordinary social activism and social justice work in areas that many of you are quite familiar with. And thank you to the entire staff of the synagogue for having this here, because I can tell you, as some of the SAJ people will tell you, we have it in our sanctuary too, and it's not always like the most obvious thing to cover the floor with, but it's working. What we're going to do now is I'm going to introduce some people, tell you a little bit to set the stage, then I get the opportunity to interview Ilze. When I say opportunity, it's because Ilze usually has 12 people around her asking for water or peanut butter sandwiches or when the next delivery is or whether they can have a stroller. And so I know about 3 sentences worth about her, although we've been working together for 4 months. So this is my chance to find out about her and for you to find out about her. I'm going to ask the borough president, who graciously has time, after I say some things about him, to wait and hear a little bit more about this effort, and then we'll ask him to speak. But Mark Levine, in addition to being the borough president of Manhattan, previously chaired the health committee in the city council, is, I think, significantly responsible for the way this city did the proper things in responding to the COVID crisis, continues to keep his eye on all of them. He has a particular passion for immigrants, and he's probably the only elected official in New York City who speaks 3 languages fluently. So that makes a huge difference in serving New York. He speaks Spanish and Hebrew and English fluently. And then they're going to have an opportunity to speak later, but I want to introduce you to the triumvirate of which Ilze is a part, but Power Malu, and Adama Bah. Literally only a volunteer in this enterprise. I get credit only because I sorted the storage room. But those 3 people are the ones who are making the decisions and moving the volunteers and moving the goods, and they have distinguished other work that they do in their own communities, and so you'll hear from them. Before I start interviewing Ilze, I want to say 2 or 3 things that are general. One is, we hope you will stay connected to this enterprise and the services that the new immigrants to New York need. You will hear contradictory pieces of information. That is because the situation changes all the time. But since I am neither polite like Ilze nor an office holder like Mark, I will tell you that the work that is being done now is not being done by any level of government at anything like the level that it should. That is my opinion. You are free to dispute that, but there's a lot of good talk about welcoming 23,000 immigrants, but the ways in which the steps that are needed, some of which we'll refer to as we talk, and the most important step, which is teaching government how to interface with an active, huge organization of volunteers who are doing all the work, has not yet been accomplished. So that's the second thing I want to say. And the third thing I want to say is, I know that most of you know this because you're here, but I want to ask you, when you're talking to people, and particularly when you're talking to the next generations in your family about immigrants, I've discovered, because I do a lot of talking to school groups, that too many kids actually have the phrase in their minds, I'm sorry to say this, illegal immigrants. So they don't really understand who we're helping. And there are 2 things they don't understand, and I would like you to be responsible for sharing this information. The first one is about these individuals. In almost every instance, not at the very beginning, but now, they are refugees from Venezuela. For those of you who are geographically challenged, I urge you to look at a map. That means they have traveled through 6 countries, and they have traveled across the Darien Gap, which is terrifying, and they will tell you it's terrifying, and families have been separated and people have died. So the notion that, well, put it affirmatively, these are people with incredible determination and resilience, and by the way, they want, even if they don't quite know how Governor Abbott got them here, they want to become New Yorkers, and they want to work, which right now our governments do not allow them to do, which of course is not going to stop them from working, it's just going to mean their work is more dangerous. So I want you to keep in mind who they are, what resilience they've showed, and then I want, please, this is just personal pleading from me, when you talk, You can do it at Thanksgiving, wherever you are. When you talk to the next generations in your families, will you please tell them how their families got to America? I don't know if there's anybody here whose grandfather was the youngest of 9 children who escaped illegally on a boat to New York and started a business, but that was me. And there are 1,000 stories like that, and they're in your families. And the kids of today, who are going to be the grown-ups and the volunteers of tomorrow, need to understand that we all came from someplace, that this is land that was originally the land of Lenape Indians, and that there is no difference between our various immigrant stories and the immigrant stories today. Okay, Ilze, this is the moment. So here's what I know. Before I brought the issue to this synagogue coalition, I heard that people were arriving, and then I heard that Greg Abbott was sending them on buses, which made me furious, and that there was an effort to welcome volunteers. I had no idea what that meant until I got to Port Authority, where there was this incredible crew of people and some huge numbers of volunteers lining up, and this woman, who I think Power and Adama would agree, is there 24/7. It's like she lives in the Port Authority. So what we need to know from you, first of all, is actually, Mark, give her the mic, is actually where you come from. The only thing I've learned about her is that she told me that she was writing a novel, but she stopped to do this. Other than that, I know nothing about her. So, go.
Okay, well, thank you so much, so very much, Ruth, and to all of you, thank you so much for this. When I saw what you had done, I burst into tears. I'm going to do it again. I'm kind of a mush. So thank you so very, very, very much. You asked where I come from. My mother comes from Latvia. My mother came over on a boat from Latvia after World War II. She had lived in displaced person camps, DP camps, as she so affectionately called them, which were refugee camps, for most of her childhood. And she came here when she was 14 years old, and somehow miraculously graduated from high school when she was 17 years old, having not known the language when she got here. So her story is the story of the people we are helping today. It's the same story. My stepfather had the same story as well. So that's where the name Ilze comes from. It comes from Latvia. I come from Long Island, personally, and I was a lawyer before falling into this crazy life in this crazy world that has rewarded me 10 times over what I had given it.
Okay, and how did you end up at Port Authority? Because you seem to, I don't know, but how did you end up like commanding the Port Authority, commanding the city, and running the show?
I was a nice Long Island girl who ended up living at the Port Authority. So I retired from the law in 2016 when there was a lot going on in my family of origin that I had to help with. I couldn't do that at the same time as being a partner in a law firm. So I retired early and dealt with that for 3 years, and then kind of looked around in 2019 and said, okay, now what? And at that time, you know who had implemented his family separation policy, and like so many of you and so many others, I was outraged by this and just felt that I had to do something. I knew I couldn't do anything about that policy or at the border, but at least I could help the people who were here seeking asylum and were on their way to hopefully safety. And I found this, I just Googled it, like we all do, and found this crazy little group that had just started up called Team TLC-NYC. And it had been started by a woman named Virginia Child. And we were just a group that packed up goodie bags, toiletries and food and clothing and toys, and welcomed people at the Port Authority bus terminal and helped them on their way to their sponsors. And that was, very rewarding and a wonderful thing. And I was just one of, a few volunteers, and just gradually over time kind of failed upward into the position of being somehow the leader of this group, just as other people through attrition. And found myself as the sole leader of the group just in time for Greg Abbott to send us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people a week, sometimes hundreds of people in a day, and kind of looked around like, how does a person who's been greeting a few people a week turn around and start greeting hundreds of people a day? And the answer to that is seated both festooned in yellow. They are the answer to how that we were able to do that. Adama Bah and Malu, Power is the head of Artists-Atheletes-Activists, and Adama is just an incredible, solo activist, amazing miracle worker. And I found them, and we were able to do it together.
Okay, so can you explain like the difference between what we were doing the first 2 months, I guess, and what's happening now?
Right, so in the first few months, well, Adama and I were at the very first bus arrival. We had gotten word, through this work I've been doing since 2019, I have a network of connections around the country. And when Governor Abbott decided to send the first bus from Texas to New York, one of those connections connected me with someone in Texas who said, okay, the first bus is coming, 54 people. And I reached out with the head of our parent organization, Grannies Respond, Catherine Cole. We reached out to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and said, okay, the first bus is coming. And they were unable to, turn around on a dime like we were. And I called up Adama and I said, okay, I'm a deer in the headlights, how do we do this? So she said, I got you, you get your volunteers, you get your supplies and your water, and I'm gonna get RAP4 Bronx to provide transport, I'm gonna get Rethink Food and Hungry Monks to provide food, and we pulled it together in a couple of days, and 9 women were standing there at Port Authority looking at each other like, here we go, on August 5th, and the bus pulled in, and no one else was there except for Fox News. Somehow, Fox News had heard about this, wondered how, and of course, broadcast live how these 8 little ladies were there from some volunteer group, unnamed volunteer group, were the only ones in New York City who were there greeting the bus. And isn't that a shame? And isn't that a disgrace? And of course, shamed the mayor and the city into stepping up like immediately. When the next bus showed up, the mayor himself was there at Port Authority. And that is true. So, so in the beginning, we were just greeting people and getting them fed, getting them some clothing, getting them little kids' toys, which really are more important than you might even be able to understand. Toiletries, etc. Getting them, transported to the shelters, helping them get into the shelters, because it's a system that's not set up for this community at all. They don't, the people who work there don't speak Spanish, and they don't have empathy for the situation, and they expect people to know how to use the subway system, and it's just completely an ill fit. So Adama and Power and their group and others, the South Bronx Mutual Aid, they were in charge of, getting these people into the shelters and helping them when they got kicked out of the shelters or didn't get a bed, and just took care of these people through the night, just all night long while I was, trying to slumber in my bed to get up the next morning at 4 a.m. They were running around doing this work, this hard work in the streets. So that's what we did for the first couple of months until suddenly there was a break was put on the busing. And now what we're dealing with, now that we're only getting a few buses a week as opposed to sometimes 10 in a day, we have people coming back to Port Authority every single day. 100 or more people, sometimes 160 people coming back to Port Authority from the shelters and seeking assistance, seeking more food. They do get food, but they're always hungry. They come back to get clothing, to get coats and shoes, to get further assistance from Adama and Power and Artists-Atheletes-Activists, to be reunited with families, to meet up with families who are still coming in. And Adama and Power are also now picking people up at the airports who are coming in, not through free rides from Texas, but spending their own money or being sent by other NGOs to come to New York, the land of opportunity, and a city that is, I have to say, we have welcomed them, and I'm proud to continue doing so.
Thank you. So I want to say that points to 2 things. One is that although once Fox News embarrassed a few people, the city for 2 or 3 months had first one city agency, then another city agency. They switched agencies now for reasons that actually I don't understand. The city has instead sent us the National Guard, who have people there. But the point is, in my mind, Mark is not responsible for any of this. The city is dealing with it. And in PR, they're announcing that they've welcomed 23,000 immigrants. The number goes up every day. But in fact, their welcome consists of being there and moving people as quickly as possible to shelters. And you know, if you follow the news at all, that they then were going to build a tent city on an island, on a beach in Frog's Neck, which they realized after a few people pointed it out to them is underwater in much of the year. And then they moved from a beach to an island. Randall's Island's probably not often underwater, but if you have ever been to Randall's Island, I can promise you there's no way to get off of Randall's Island without a car or walking across a footbridge. So it's a crazy place to have been developed. And it was, anyway, we've spent probably close to between $750,000 and $1 million, the city has, of my tax money and yours, on systems that don't work. And my observation and criticism is that while the city is, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but largely following the law of right to shelter and moving people into shelter beds, they're not thinking either 2 weeks ahead, which is where are they going to put people as the shelters get more and more full, and so they've just begun to acquire some hotel spaces in Manhattan. But at the same time, and this is my criticism, they have not figured out a way to coordinate with the volunteers. So very, very often, people were moving out while we were still trying to get them donated clothing to wear. And it, again, to go back to my earlier point, it speaks to the resilience of these volunteers. No one told them to come back to Port Authority. They said, no, wait a minute, where is the only place that someone has given us food, someone has given us clothing, maybe those people also have coats because it's getting cold, let's go to the Port Authority. And they started showing up, and then word of mouth. So now there's a group every day. And it's great because they're getting services, and it's, from my point of view, very sad because they're coming back to the place where they first sat on chairs for a half an hour, not knowing where they were. They're back in that same space, like waiting to see who can help them. And to be honest with you, we're doing everything we can in terms of clothing, and it's not perfect. I mean, you didn't necessarily pack a girl child brown pants size 6, which one of our volunteers will come in and say, the family out there needs a pair of brown pants. Yesterday he came in and said, there's a woman who wants a black purse. I said, tell her if she gets a purse, she'll be very lucky, but it's hard. And so it's very, very tough, and it's an interaction, and the failure of the city to appoint some people who would coordinate totally with the volunteer efforts and see what else needs to be done and ask volunteers to do it and credit volunteers for doing it is very sad. And we have thoughts about how to proceed because there are going to be more immigrants and there are 23,000 people here, and I'll have stuff to say about that later. But Mark, you've been quieter for longer than any elected official in Manhattan has ever been quiet. So why don't you take over for a while?
It was very hard. I pulled it off. Let me just say that I'm overflowing with pride and inspiration right now to be first on the stage with these two incredible leaders. I mean, Ruth Messinger, one of my role models in life, and you continue to amaze me every day. And Ilze, they say that great leaders emerge in moments of crisis, and you have certainly risen to be a breakout leader in this crisis. Can we give both of them another round? Thank you. I'm so inspired to be here in this congregation that it's one of the most storied synagogues in New York City history and known far and wide for your commitment to social activism, in no small part because of the incredible leadership of Rabbi Joel and Rabbi Joe Rubin, who I'm just getting to know, is undoubtedly going to be also amazing. But to be part of this interfaith coalition, it's so inspiring the way that faith communities of all backgrounds have stood up and come together and responded in this time of crisis. It is truly, truly inspiring to be with all of you and to see what you've done. I want to start by saying that the effort of Governor Abbott, this absolutely disgusting, cynical political ploy using human beings as pawns, has backfired. It has backfired. He was betting that New York City would treat the arriving asylum seekers as pariahs, as burdens, that we would maybe turn them away. And despite the real shortcomings of the local government response, which Ruth is here to remind us of, overall, we have done the opposite. We have embraced the newcomers, especially because of you and regular New Yorkers who have given of yourselves in really inspiring ways. And I don't think that Greg Abbott counted on that. And so a lot of us expected that come the election, he would stop sending buses. And that's exactly what has happened. It's exactly what has happened. Because we're not serving his political theater anymore. And the truth is, the families arriving absolutely will be an asset to the city. There's no doubt. As every other wave of immigrants and migrants has been, going back to your grandparents and your mother, I think, and my great-grandparents, and we've all got similar stories. It's always been that way. And if you have spent time with the families, which I think everyone here has, the first question I am asked in almost every case, tell me if you guys hear this, is how can I get a job? There's an incredible drive to contribute to the city, to make an income, to pay rent, to pay taxes, and we have to do more to help support the transition to the workforce, which maybe I'll talk about. But it shows you that these are families that are going to contribute. I have no doubt that this will make New York City stronger. It's true that we're not getting 500 a day arriving on the buses as we were at the peak in September, but we're still getting about 500 a week. Some coming on buses, others are now coming by other means. Some are actually finding their own way here because, and this is a good thing, they've heard that we are treating them with respect here. So we are still getting arrivals, but even still, we've got probably 23,000 which have come. We have about 17,000 which are in the shelter system. And they have many, many unmet needs. They have inadequate legal resources prepared to help them. They have immigration cases. The backlog right now to get an appointment at the main navigation center, the next appointment for a legal consult is March. And some of them have court dates before that. There is real food insecurity. I was texting when we were starting the program here because someone sent me a picture of lunch served in one of the Manhattan shelters where a lot of migrants are, which I will tell you, Ruth, the name of the shelter later. But it was a picture of a piece of bread and a bag of sliced apples. That was what was served as lunch today. So they really, even those migrants which are now in the shelter system, truly need help on the food front. There are real challenges in the schools. There are 5,000 or 6,000 kids who are in the public schools at this point, and the schools do not have adequate bilingual staff in general, but specifically social workers. The kids have been through incredible trauma in their home countries, and the stories we're hearing of the journeys here are just absolutely heartrending. And it's going to take a long time for the young people to deal with that and to navigate through that, and they need help, and they need bilingual help. And there's inadequate services in the schools right now because the schools don't have the staff. Many of them are in Manhattan, so I've been to a number of the schools. We have so much work to do to support them. So this is not only a session to pat ourselves on the back, though you guys have been amazing. I hope this can also be a time where we focus on the ongoing challenges today and in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you for having me here. Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask you, before we go back to Ilze and see if Power Adama wants to add things and give you a little time for questions before the service. But before all of that, Mark, will you talk about the work situation? And let me just say that there have been times, since I'm the oldest one around, there have been times in New York where there was real anxiety about new people coming in because they really were competing for a scarce number of jobs. Right now, that is definitely not the situation. I literally saw an email from the head of the construction industry to someone in city administration saying, where are these people and how can we get them onto jobs? And I know from one of Ilze's volunteers that Restaurant Associates says restaurants are desperate for these people. So why is it a rule that they can't work for 150 days, and how do we break that rule?
Yes, I love it. I love it. Ruth, you were great at explaining in the beginning exactly who's coming to the city, because there's a lot of misconceptions about that. A person who is seeking asylum in the U.S. actually can work. They need to get a work permit, but they're allowed to pursue that. Some people are surprised to hear that. There's a legal path to a work permit here. The problem is bureaucracy in Washington, and a built-in delay of 150 days that we need Congress to overcome. But honestly, many of the migrants are not getting their permit anything like 150 days. And that is just because of inadequate staffing at the Department of Homeland Security. So this is partly a resource matter and partly an issue for congressional action, which personally I am pushing to be resolved in the lame duck session, because it's going to be much, much tougher come January 1st. But there's great work being done in the meantime. There's a wonderful program not far from here called Renaissance Technical Institute, which is training hundreds of migrants with a Spanish language program on OSHA 40, to get the OSHA 40 license. That's the safety certification they need. It's 40 hours of training. They're overwhelmed, and in fact, maybe I will connect Carol and Jolie to this great nonprofit, because they need help. But if you can see them in action, you'll be really inspired. And they're getting jobs in the construction industry. So the will is there, the need is there. There's some obstacles that we have to overcome. We need to focus on this more, because the livelihood of the families is at stake, and we can solve this problem. And I would love to help this coalition focus more on that.
Thank you. And I just want to call out Mark also. I don't know if you read while you walk down the street, but Mark has used space on the New York City kiosks to tell people where to go and tell people where to donate clothing, which has been really helpful. So Ilze, can you explain what's going on now at Port Authority? So people are showing up, and what are you, now she's running a high-end shopping operation.
It was not high-end until you came along. Ruth turned our storage room, which was, first of all, we didn't have a storage room until Ruth came along. We were begging for storage at the Port Authority bus terminal for months, and lugging clothing back and forth in a truck that Power was driving every morning to Port Authority, piled high with bags and bags and bags of, not sorted the way you have sorted it, just bags of stuff, and just trying to get clothing to people. And luckily back then it wasn't as urgent to get them, warm stuff. It was just a t-shirt and shorts, something clean was really the order of the day. And Ruth just agitated and reached out to the governor of the state of New York finally, and got us this storage space. And then she proceeded to organize the storage space so that it really does now look like the storeroom of a store. And what we do now, when people come back, we sit down, we have order forms that I made up on my printer at home, and we have volunteers interview folks and find out what they need and make sure that they're okay in other regards, give them some food, give them some coffee and water, give toys out to the children, and have them relax, and then take down a clothing order. And we go into the back storage room, and our shoppers in the back room fill the order while the folks wait and enjoy some coffee and snacks. And it's all because Ruth came in there and just said, this is crazy, we need to start doing it the right way. And I'm very, very, very grateful. I don't know how we would have done it without you.
What Ilze created in the Port Authority is, yesterday I went down to Dunkin' Dunkin' Donuts to get myself, those of you who know me are not surprised, a Diet Coke. And I had my volunteer badge on, and she said, "Oh, you get 10% off if you're a volunteer." What? It's a Dunkin' Donuts. You all have a discount.
Well, I think that that's just, one little example of how people and organizations and groups and companies have really shown up. I have not had the time to reach out and say, "Can you help us with this? Can you help us with that?" But what's been happening is just like what happened here. I've been getting people coming to me and coming to our group and saying, "We want to do this for you." We didn't ask for a discount at Dunkin' Donuts. We were just buying so many donuts and coffee that they said, "We'll give you a discount." And it's over and over again. We have people doing, fundraisers for us. There's a benefit concert for us. There are people showing up and, doing clothing drives. It's been absolutely incredible. The outpouring of love from New Yorkers is just, I'm gonna cry, has been the best part of this, to see that this really is, Philadelphia may say it's the city of brotherly love, but we are the city of just love. Love. I'm so proud of New York City.
First of all, so I'll tell you my two favorite stories. The National Guard, which I'm very fond of the National Guard. I think they have no idea why they've been asked to be there. So they have about 8 or 10 people a day in there, or more than that. And they're, with all due respect, they're not doing anything, but I don't think they've been asked to do anything. The city told them, I don't know what, to watch us or whatever. But like 2 days ago, there was a knock on the door of the storage closet, which the Port Authority insists that we keep locked. It's a huge room, so we're constantly walking back and forth to the door to open it. And there's a National Guardsman there, and he, basically I've had no conversation with them, and he said, "Excuse me, there's a little girl who peed herself. Do you have pants for her?" So he came into the storage room and got underwear and slacks for the little girl. But 2 days ago, Ilze was doing an interview with Channel 7, and somebody told me she was talking to Channel 7, so I went out unnecessarily, but to remind her we needed warm children's clothing. And then as I was walking away, I said, "Oh, we need size 3 diapers. Can you send someone to buy them?" And she said yes, because she always says yes. And then about 2 hours later, there was a box by the door of size 3 diapers. So I came out to her and I said, "That was really fast." And she said, "I didn't buy them. The Channel 7 reporter bought them."
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. People just keep showing up. It's been amazing, really beautiful.
So I want to, Mark, we're counting on you to literally give us the advocacy orders for how to move this stuff, because this work stuff is just ridiculous. I want to talk about an idea that Ilze and I have had, which we're trying to advance, because this might be a model site for it if we can move it forward. We do not have the particulars, and as I say right now, and here Mark might be hugely helpful, but we don't have the connections to the part of the city that actually runs the shelters. So we don't know how to connect to them. But our notion is that wherever there's a city shelter, wherever it is, there are houses of worship within 10 blocks. And if we could identify for the Row Hotel in Times Square or the men's shelter here or whatever, 1 or 2 mosques, synagogues, or churches that would be like this space, but like, let's say 2 afternoons a week. So we would tell, I'm making up the numbers here, but 60 people who live in a shelter not far from here, on Tuesday afternoons and Friday afternoons, you could go to Shaaray Tefila. We could dispatch, she's got 700 volunteers who fill out this amazing sign. The form is called Sign Up Genius, and every time I fail to sign it up, I realize it's because I'm not a genius. But you can sign up, but the idea would be to start this slow, but to send volunteers here we have so much clothing now. With all of this, we can pull out samples of clothing. We can pull out, I think Adama's going to take care of some African immigrants in the Bronx. So we can pull out like a sample of men's clothing, women's clothing, children's clothing, and have it here, not like this, but in a very small area, Rabbi, I promise you. And then send a volunteer or 2 to help someone in the synagogue open it up just a limited time. And it does mean saying to people, no, you have to come back on Friday or whatever. But it would be a much better place. And by the way, the worst thing about our current operation is that we can't let people in the storage room. So we are picking clothing for them, and that's not the greatest thing. First of all, I wish to say there are no volunteers in the city of New York who seem to know what size diapers go with what age children. So I'm like a diaper interpreter all day long. But the idea would be, be able to have 5 people here shopping for their families, they could actually pick things out, which would be much better than the shoppers who are fantastic volunteers, but are trying to guess what size, what color, what would be good to take out. So that's our idea, and we'd love to talk further to Shaaray Tefila about making this maybe a test site.
Yeah.
Julie?
So you taught me that the best.
This is gonna be dangerous.
She taught me that one of the best ways to give to grassroots organizations that need flexibility because the needs are changing all the time is to give money. Ilse and her group has been paying out of pocket to send people to other cities by buying them bus tickets so they can get to be reunited with their families, right? And
Yeah, I
told
owe Power
her
a lot of
she-
money right now. He actually laid out a lot of his own money, and I still owe him thousands of dollars after
we put
he's
up,
laid out his own money, and I laid out my own money, and lots of volunteers have laid out their own money to do
and I
that.
learned this from Ruth when she told me about a trip she took to Haiti after the earthquake. When there was a mound, she thought it was a mountain, right? In the airport, there was a mound of coats and blankets that people sent to tropical Haiti. You know, that's why there's a list of very specific items that were needed. So we put up QR codes around the room. I think there's 2 separate ones. One is for cash donations to Team TLC-NYC, which really is very valuable because then Ilse and others have a way of meeting immediate needs, which are changing all the time. So we love the coats and the warm clothing, don't get me wrong, but we also need cash. So there's QR codes for that, and there's another QR code to buy the types of clothing items they really need, many of them new, off Amazon wish lists. And Carol has something to say about that.
Not that I'm a chaser, but seal these pockets. Whoops. If anybody wants to dig deep today, I can fill these pockets with bills. It's not a problem for me. So I've already received donations from families who have written checks, they're in here. From churches who have written checks, they're in here. From synagogues who have handed me checks, they're in here. It's an opportunity, just saying.
Do you accept credit cards?
Yes,
I finally do.
And it's Thanksgiving, so I'm gonna remind you again, this is a fine thing to be talking about this Thursday. Adama, Power, do you wanna add anything?
Maria, why don't you come up here and talk about the African migrants that you've been helping?
I'm a good advocate, but a hard-boiled teacher. So when the buses started, I noticed there weren't any black migrants on it. But then I was getting calls about black migrants arriving in New York. So I found something very suspicious. So I started calling around other partners around the country. We later found out that black migrants are held longer. So once they cross the Mexican border, they're detained, and after they're released to another detention center. They're detained for 6 months to a year. They have to prove their credible fear before they are released. With Hispanic migrants, they're released 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days, sometimes a week. But with African migrants, they're not. All the African migrants have to pay a bond. Their bond, the highest I personally saw was $6,000, but it goes higher. African migrants, or I should say black migrants, have to wear an ankle bracelet. Hispanic migrants do not. Hispanic migrants do not have to pay a bond. Hispanic migrants do not have to wear an ankle bracelet, but black migrants do. So when I first heard about the story, when they were at Port Authority, and this imam who you guys will meet called me, he says, Adama, you need to be here. You need to come right now. And I'm like, okay, if he's calling, there's something urgent. I go to his mosque, there's 300 African migrants that arrived. And I'm like, where did they come from? They all arrived from the border and had nowhere else to go. So since then, we have been advocating for language access. We've been advocating for resources for them. We have a lot of Muslim women that arrived that, unfortunately, at the border, they had ripped off their headscarves and they ripped off their bare garments. So we've been collecting donations from anybody. But please support Ilze, because if you support Ilze, she supports us. But with African migrants, Once they are released from the detention center in Louisiana, for example, which is the most common detention center for African migrants, and Atlanta is also another very common detention center for Black migrants that includes Haitians and Hondurans. Once they're left on the streets, and then they have to call us asking them to pay for their flights. There's an amazing organization called Abisha who has been paying not only for their bond, but also for their flights to come here. This morning we just had a pregnant woman who was detained for about 4 months, and she's 8 months pregnant. She just arrived in New York City this morning, and we just put her in a hotel in one of these hercs. So I think when I do these events, highlighting Black migrants is very important because we're not covering them a lot. There's over 10,000 of them in New York City alone. And where they're being housed? At mosques around the city. There are only 3 mosques that are public about it, which is Imam Nasser, who you'll meet, Brooklyn, and another location in the Bronx. But all of the other mosques, for security reasons, for safety reasons, they have not been public about it. So please talk about the Black migrants.
I also want to share that I've been on my phone since I got here. It's because we spoke about where else are they arriving. They're arriving at the airports. Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, and even ISP, the MacArthur Airport. We get about 200 to 300 migrants a day arriving by plane. We are told by grassroots organizations, other organizations around the country, when they're sending some of these migrants. And when we go pick them up, or we ask volunteers to go pick them up, they end up picking up much more than what the number we had. Some of them, unfortunately, we miss them because we're not aware that they're arriving. We have to pay for their Ubers because they don't know how to travel. Some of the actual airport staff are starting to help us out, and we exchange numbers with them. And when they identify the migrants, they call us and say, look, we have families here, where do you want to send them? They take them to the Uber or Lyft arrival pickup area, and we send them. Right now, currently, I have 20 families that on my WhatsApp right now, trying to coordinate their pickups and then sending them to the destinations where they have beds available. So this is 24/7, as Ilze was saying. Adama and I are constantly on our phones. We're constantly on alert, making sure that we are case managers, social workers. We are an ear for the migrants. The reason why they keep coming back to Port Authority is because it's the first place that someone actually paid attention to them, actually took time to listen to them. And as we do that, we also discover other things that have happened to them, a lot of horrible things that have happened to them, and they're dealing with so much trauma, and we're able to actually get friends of ours that may be our therapists to share their time, their space to speak with the migrants. They don't charge us. Anything that has to do with mental health therapy, or even some of our lawyer friends. I had 2 lawyer friends. Adama has a lawyer friend that actually helped her when her case. Adama's undocumented, what was formerly undocumented about 10 years ago. And so they come to the Port Authority and they do their little sessions where we can help as many people as possible, because as they were mentioning earlier, the wait list is 2-3 months from now, and their status is going to be affected by this. Another thing is that they don't have Metro cards, so they're being told to go to all of these appointments to get their NYC ID, which is something that we advocated for early on, and thankfully we're able to get them that. But they don't have the means to support themselves to even get on the train. So now they're risking their immigration status, because if they get stopped by the police, which we have so many cases now, they get a summons, and then that's going to be a red mark on their immigration. And so we're going to start talking to some people and try to get some leniency on that, because what we're doing is we're on the ground and we're actually speaking and experiencing and witnessing these things happen in real time. And they're ever changing, but our job is just to be advocates for them. And we can only do but so much. We're small but mighty There are a lot of other mammoth organizations that get funding. It doesn't trickle down to us, but we'll continue doing the work. And this airport, the airport jobs that we're doing and the pickups that we're doing, it's gonna grow, continue to grow, and we still don't have any support from.
Thank you.
Anywhere, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're not standing in the way of an episode function, and give Ilze and Mark a chance to each say something if they leave. If their questions come up and see me over there, we'll answer them. You heard part of the story, you didn't hear all of the stories. Mark told you that these people are going to be stalwarts of New York in the future. The first month that I was down there, the commissioner of the mayor's office of immigrant affairs was there greeting buses. And I said to him, it's really important to me that you're down here. And he said, I remember crossing the border when I was 5. So that's the story of New York. So you've given us a huge amount of stuff. We could use lots of volunteers as shoppers and sorters at Port Authority. You can go on the website to sign up. You can stay tuned for the new experiments we want. Talk about this on Thanksgiving, and the things not on your list that we could use are money. I can't tell you how much money this woman has spent. I have no idea. Filled Metro cards. Carol's Pocket will take money, and we'll buy the Metro cards. And if you're willing to go to a store, not right now to give to me, but if you're willing to go to a store, we need sanitary napkins. We have enough Tampax to take care of most of the small country, but we need sanitary napkins and used or new strollers.
We need a lot of strollers, yeah. And size 3 diapers.
So thank you all very much for what you've done. Thank you for the concert, Borough. Joe, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
We'll give a rousing round of applause to these incredible leaders. Thank you so much to all of you. Thanks to you so much. These are the kind of people who, when you thank them, they point at other people, who then point at other people because they don't do it to get credit, which is amazing and inspiring. Thank you for what you do every day for the things that we know about, the things that we don't know about. And we want to help strengthen your work. There's a way that you can, if you know how the technology works, you can flash your camera at one of these QR codes in the corner. I think it will tell you more about how you can get involved and deepen and further the work. We're grateful to all of them. We're grateful to all of you. This has been an amazing day, and we're going to bring it to a close with a beautiful worship service next door. So some of you have been here for a long time today. We hope that you'll stick around and join us right next door. If you don't know exactly how to get there, you're going to go out that door, turn left, and then left again into the sanctuary. We're going to begin our service shortly. Thank you all for being here. Thanks so much.